I can still say good morning. Good morning to everyone. Are we ready? Ready? Good morning, everyone. I want to thank you for being here this morning. Yesterday, the members of the Barbados Hotel and Tourism Association, the Barbados Workers Union, and the Government of Barbados met to discuss a number of matters pertaining to the state of the tourism industry, but also to the industrial climate within the tourism industry. This meeting was occasioned as a result of a letter received earlier in the week, I think Tuesday, from the BHTA, as well as a request for a meeting from the Barbados Workers Union with respect to other matters pertaining to industrial instability at, I believe, what is known as the Club Resort in Old Town. I felt that it was critical, therefore, that the government meet with the stakeholders in the industry in order to be able to ensure that we resolve a number of issues. And I want to thank both sides for what I believe has been a productive meeting. The BHTA would have worked with the Barbados Workers Union and the government in respect of settling the BEST program, which is intended to be able to sustain employment as well as to sustain enterprises within the tourism sector during this very difficult time. Indeed, let me say at the outset that the anticipation of the government was that there would always be a second wave in Europe and North America. We were told that every day since March or April. And in anticipation of that, rather than continue to have persons be subject only to the arrangements within the context of the national insurance scheme that would lead to unemployment benefit which has been exhausted, or indeed severance, which will pose other problems across the industry as well as problems with respect to the sustainability of employment for persons in this country. We took a decision to come up with the BEST program. The Barbados Workers Union, through Ms. Moore, General Secretary, in July, would have put on the table the concept of a job subsidy program, which morphed into elements of the BEST program. The government would have discussed this with the Barbados Hotel and Tourism Association, and in addition, we laid a framework that would require us to link it, one, to training, because we believe that whatever we do, we can always do better, and we would use this downtime to secure training of all persons at all levels. Greening, whether it is water harvesting or water conservation. Renewable energy for those who are interested in pursuing that and us facilitating the same. Digitization, because almost everything we do, I keep telling people, this is effectively my office now, and for most of you too. So that digitization is critical, especially in the context of a pandemic where you don't want people to be touching where you can avoid it, and hence cashless mechanisms, other mechanisms that are not requiring people to touch often or to do things that would expose them to a greater level of risk to the pandemic becomes all the more important. And then, of course, linking it to domestic sectors for enhancing the opportunities from manufacturing to agriculture, agro-processing, culture, ensuring, therefore, that as we invest in the tourism sector invests in others in this economy so that they can bring them along as well, because we only have a limited pool of resources and funds from which to draw. That is the overall objective, and therefore when the British government took the decision to shut down until the 2nd of December it is, in effect, this is what we anticipated. And we anticipated, therefore, that we would need to step up to the plate. The job support comes and came initially in the context of supporting the salaries of persons below the insurable level up to 80% of their salary. The BHTA represented to us, and we have accepted, that we would need to include some element to cover supervisors, and management, because just simply covering those below the NIS level, especially with what has happened in the last month, has been too difficult. And as they look forward, they need to be able to have some additional assistance for that and additional assistance for working capital, in particular utilities and some other operational expenses, because what you're dealing with is companies that basically have no or little revenue coming in. We have agreed that we would include the supervisory management and others, and that we would do a ratio of 80-20, so that only 20% of what they secure can be applied towards supervisory or management, and the other 80% goes to the wages of the workers. And this has been the representation that we have culled, coming from our consultations with both the BHTA and the Barbados Workers Union. We also agreed that there were some issues for some institutions with respect to preference shares. And while the government's preference is for investment in preference shares, because we don't record that above the line to affect our deficit, we recognize that we may have to meet a few of the entities where they are, and to that extent, the issue of loans and or ultimately equity through the creation of a Barbados Hospitality Investment Fund, or whatever we choose to call it, but something that allows us to stabilize companies from going into bankruptcy as far as possible, unless they were chronically insolvent before the pandemic came. But for those who literally could stand and walk before, we would want to make sure that next year this time, that they are still walking and moving. And for that to happen, as I say all the time, you have to keep your head above water, and in this instance, probably just even your nostrils above water, because of the nature of the difficulty. But as you do that, you have to keep your arms and your legs moving to keep fit for when tourism recovers. The other major reason why this was critical for us to support, and the Barbados Workers Union has been adamant about it from day one, has to be also the well-being and the welfare of the workers, not just from the point of view of only their pockets, which is absolutely critical, because if you get a lump sum of severance and you don't have a job to go to, the money gone in no time at all. And what matters is people's capacity to sustain themselves and to survive. And to that extent, therefore, when we looked at the well-being, we also recognize that the mental well-being of the workers is also critical, because people need purpose. And I think all of us have learned that very clearly in the course of the last 10 months with COVID, that it's not just about surviving, but people need a sense of purpose in life if they are to feel well about themselves and feel well about going to work, going to help people or work or live in a family the next day. And then the other final reason why the BEST program was inevitable for us is that the hotel stock. If Mr. Seal and Mr. Odell and others who own properties in this country shut down their properties for sustained periods of time, we all know if you go away too long and you don't flush the toilet at home, what's happened? Toilets start to seize up. You don't think the water and the washers, and then you start to get little yellow marks in the sink. They can't sell a room with no yellow marks in the sink. They can't sell a room with a toilet that's not working. So when the capital stock of the tourism industry becomes at risk because it is shut down and nobody's using it, and when you don't use something, then the other issue is when you lock up buildings and you got tiles, what happens? The tiles blow in this weather. So there are all kinds of things that we would have to do in order to avoid a dilapidation situation, and as the officials would call it, the professionals, they would then tell you need a dilapidation survey before they could take a single tourist again. So when we looked at everything, it was inevitable that we come up with this kind of program rather than just putting the money in national insurance scheme and paying out people unemployment benefit and severance and not being able to save the tourism plant, not being able to sustain employment for the workers, not being able to sustain the mental wellness of the workers and the owners. Because quite frankly, this is probably the most destabilizing event that anybody has had to go through in our lives since we have been alive. So what do we do? You see this here? I am so proud to be able to lead a country where I can have owners of capital and labor and government come together. And this is who we are. This is the legacy of this country. Does it mean that every decision we get and do will always be right at the first instance? Probably not. And what we were able to do yesterday, and I've been using this week to do a lot of resetting and retweaking, because you have to go, just like you service a car, you have to go every now and again and tighten up everything, because wear and tear and inability to see how it is going to actually happen and work out until it happens and you can watch it is something that we have to be mindful of. So yesterday, the hotels, as I said, hoteliers made some, and direct tourism services made some requests of us. We have agreed to include the supervisory management and the supervisors and the management in the 80-20 ratio to which I referred. We have agreed that we will look for other legal constructs and financial constructs beyond preference shares in order to meet the institutions where they are. We have agreed, however, that they will work with us and the workers to speak with one voice as to why the best program is the preferable program for us, as opposed to people running simply for severance. And then we agreed that where we do have to deal with severance, as we have willingly agreed to do, to make sure that the workers are not the collateral damage of the actions of some, that the NIS will also seek to recover with dispatch the 75% contribution that the NIS severance scheme makes towards the severance payment of each worker. So, and the chairman of the National Insurance Scheme is with us, and he will also speak briefly too. But the bottom line is that this notion that we can conduct industrial relations or negotiations in the press only serves to hurt us. And I think, Mr. Oda, you were one of the ones who complained this morning. You had a set of people calling you from the UK wondering what was happening. And the country needs to be sensitive to the messages that we're sending, because we're trying to keep people in jobs, we're trying to keep companies afloat, and we're trying to keep the government capable of taking care of everybody, including especially those who cannot now take care of themselves because of the loss of work or the loss of opportunities or the loss of business. And therefore, as I have done on so many other occasions, I ask us to treat to this as a family would treat to it. And I ask us to recognize that each of us has to take care of the interests of each other. And to that extent, the notion of trying to use the well-being of workers or the situation in which workers find themselves as a platform for PR or promotion is a most unfortunate episode, because what we're doing is playing with people's emotions and playing with people's livelihoods. And between the emotions and the livelihoods, what we end up with is an unstable situation, both at the level of that particular worker, at the level of the establishment, and at the level of the country. And all I ask us to do is let us work out things in the way that we have always done and will always know how to. As a result, I think I can say, and the others are free to speak as soon as I finish, that in one voice yesterday we agreed that the workers of the club must not be made to be collateral damage of the actions of the owner of that hotel. That secondly, that the NIS indicated that they have no and gave no such agreement to pay any sums of money. But what we will do without agreement is act in accordance with the law. And the law allows us to be able to take care of those workers. But equally, the law requires of us, and sometimes it has not been done with as much diligence as I would have liked, requires the NIS to go and to have that money which they have spent reimbursed to them, because the government's contribution is only 25%, but it is the company that must pay 75%. Now let me be clear. We have no difficulty in assuming the responsibility where there's a genuine bankruptcy. But where there are instances where money is available or assets are accessible, then you cannot expect the National Insurance Scheme to carry 100% of the severance. And we have been very clear about that, and the instructions given to both the chairman of the NIS as well as the Attorney General is to sit down and work and ensure that the government of Barbados is not at any stage put on the back foot in this matter. And to that extent, I'm happy to report that, as we discussed it too, that the workers at the club will get their money. The General Secretary of the Barbados Workers Union, Ms. Moore, has been insistent that she would like it for Independence Day. In fairness to the NIS, they could not say yesterday whether that was yet possible, and they have indicated to me that by Tuesday they will indicate exactly what day they can make the payments by, because they have to do the calculations, they have to do the preparations, etc. And that by Tuesday we should be able to tell the workers on what day they should be able to get the money, hopefully. And if not by Independence Day, I've asked them to do it as soon as possible thereafter, because we're conscious that this is December, but we're also conscious that this particular group was slightly different because they were laid off in 2019 summer, and therefore it constrained what kind of benefits I'm told that they could have accessed in 2020 because of the long layoff that they had in 2019. Suffice it to say, the government therefore will ensure that we work cooperatively through the National Insurance Scheme and with the Barbados Workers Union and with the Barbados Hotel and Tourism Association to ensure that we speak as one in these matters, and that the workers must not be collateral damage with respect to the behavior of that particular hotel, who, by the way, breached their own promises to the workers first and foremost, ought to have, in my view, ought to have stood up and spoken to the workers and spoken to all of us, from the BHTA right back through to the Workers' Union, to the government, rather than us learning about these matters ad hoc. The first time this matter was brought to my attention, Ms. Moore brought it to my attention, it was Tuesday or somewhere around then, Monday or Tuesday, and then again late in the week others brought it to my attention. So that by then we had already determined that this is the way in which we will go. So my friends, I want us to understand and appreciate that we live in a world where this is happening not just in Barbados, but it's happening in almost every country. And for the tourism and travel dependent countries of the world or regions of the world, it is even more acute. So in a state like New York or in a state like Florida, they will feel it more acutely because of the disruption of travel and tourism companies in a way that perhaps a state that does not rely on tourism will not feel it as acutely. I want the country, therefore, to contextualize this. I want the workers to remember that we got this and we got you. And we've heard it from day one, and that's why we wanted an expedited process rather than the traditional process for accessing severance. I think that the workers at Grand Barbados are still waiting for over a decade because of an archaic and expedited tribunal system that I've asked both the AG and the chairman of the NIS, not just to review for the pandemic, but for us to review going forward for everybody, because it clearly has not been working as well as it should. With those few words, I'd like to invite the BHTA to speak, and then obviously the Barbados Workers Union, and then the NIS to add to anything that I've said, and we'll take any quick questions thereafter. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Let me first start by thanking the Prime Minister and her team and the Barbados Workers Union for meeting with us yesterday as an association. We did recognize that there were some issues, as the Prime Minister said, with the BEST program, and having had met with our members, we had identified some of those issues, and that was then communicated into the Prime Minister's office. We dare say that the meeting yesterday was a very productive meeting. It did resolve a number of the issues for us. I think what did work very well for us was that meeting had some very frank and open discussion, so that in those situations where there were things that we identified that could not be accommodated, we were informed very clearly as to the rationale for why those things could not be accommodated. And with the changes that we anticipate that have been accepted for the BEST program, what we will certainly be doing is going back to our membership to share that information with them and to encourage them in those cases where persons have not as yet submitted applications to the program, that we will encourage them to do so, because as the Prime Minister said, this program has been developed with a view to ensuring that employees remain actively engaged and are developed for the industry going forward, and also to ensure that the operators within the industry are able to survive beyond this crisis. One of the things that we identified clearly is that the employee welfare is a primary issue and concern for us, and I would say that certainly from our deliberations with the Barbers Workers Union, that we recognize from our side that we both have the same interests when it comes to the employees. You know, we might go about getting to the target in different ways, but at the end of the day, I think we have the same objective, and we recognize that that is the welfare of the workers within the industry. Because we have some of the owners here at the table, we have some others in the room, but one thing we recognize is that this industry thrives on its people. The industry cannot survive without the employees and the contribution that they have made and will continue to make to the industry going forward. While that is the case, we recognize that, yes, there have been instances of persons not doing what has been good industrial relations practices. And we've said it before, and we want to reinforce the point that as an association, we encourage all of our members at every opportunity to ensure that they practice the right and proper industrial relations practices to ensure that a climate of harmony is maintained between the employer and the employee, between us as an association and the Barbers Workers Union. And to that end, I would also want to share with you that what we have been doing over the last few months is that we've had a number of scheduled meetings with the Barbers Workers Union, not simply when issues arise, but as a mechanism to ensure that the channel of communication remains open, that if there are issues that the BWU has identified, they will bring those to the table so that we can address them. Because one of the ways we see this industry going forward is in a collaborative way. And we see ourselves as an avenue to certainly ensure that where there are challenges, we can intervene and put the measures in place to resolve those issues as far as possible. Where that might not be possible, then certainly, you know, there are other courses of action that can be taken. But we see ourselves certainly as a support mechanism to the government, to our members, and to the Barbers Workers Union to ensure that as we move forward and come out of this crisis, that Barbers comes out of this with all cylinders firing to ensure that this industry grows beyond where it has been in the past. With those few words, I'd like to turn you over to the CEO as well.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, Prime Minister, and everyone in attendance. I won't be long with my remarks. I believe that the Chairman captured everything from the perspective of the BHTA. We are certainly committed to the continued collaboration with government and with the Barbados Workers Union. As the Chairman pointed out, you know, there's no business that can be successful without the commitment and the dedication of the workers, and we recognize that that is a very important factor. We have given the commitment that in addition to representing the interests of our members, we will also speak vigorously to the fact that all persons must adhere to good labor relation practices. And where that does not occur, then we will take the necessary action. We will not endorse, nor will we embrace any situations where members do not conform to the best labor practices. It is critical and important that in this very challenging pandemic environment that we are all able to work together. The reality is that Barbados is here for all of us. This is our home. This is where we have to secure the future for not simply ourselves, but for future generations. And I just wanted to reinforce that commitment from the BHTA to work along with government and the Workers' Union. Prime Minister did make reference in her opening remarks to the fact that there is going to be a program which the BHTA in collaboration with the Ministry of Tourism and the BTMI will be working on. That is an expanded staycation program, because we have to use this opportunity as well to provide for Barbadians to be able to explore the tourism industry. There are some Barbadians who do not believe that they are able to participate as they should, and we want to ensure that that opportunity is given and provided to them, so that the industry is an industry that is inclusive, an industry that is there for the benefit of all Barbadians. Thank you.
I don't know if Mr. Odell or Mr. Seal would like to add to that before I pass on to the Workers' Union. Gordon?
Well, I would just like to thank the Prime Minister I would just like to thank the Prime Minister and the Minister of Tourism for having given us an opportunity to air our concerns yesterday. I can just imagine with everything that's going on that they're kept pretty busy. We are having the worst year in tourism probably ever on record. And so we are all trying our best to survive it. That doesn't give any excuse for the kind of behavior that we're referring to with the club. That and there anyone that's not taking their responsibilities where they are actually in a position to. And I just hope that we don't see repeats of that with anybody else. I know the government made the point, the Prime Minister made the point that they will do everything in their power to make sure that that the businesses that take that sort of action are dealt with severely, or severely as they can under the law. But we did manage to say to bring up certain points with the BEST program. I think the whole situation is quite dynamic. I don't think we've seen the end of the spikes in this COVID pandemic. I am certainly under the impression that what they've done in England and other parts of the UK is intended to ease the pressure on the hospitals rather than to actually deal a knockout blow to COVID. And if that's the case, then basically we may see additional lockdowns in the future. So we may have, I say it's dynamic because I think we need to keep talking to the government about tweaking the program or making changes as we can, as we see these problems arise. So the news at the moment is good in terms of the vaccines coming out. When they will actually make a difference to the travel business, I'm not sure. But what I am sure of is that there's a lot of pent-up demand to travel. Barbados has got a great reputation out there. And I think the 12-month stamp had a double effect, because it not only gave Barbados front and center stage on all of the major networks throughout the world, and so it made us top of the mind awareness, basically. There are lots of people that have inquired about Barbados that didn't even know we existed before the Prime Minister got our interviews on CNN and all of the big big newspapers. Everybody was carrying Barbados at that particular time. So it had a double effect, because in addition to the people who've actually come in, it put us at the top of the mind for travel as well. So I am optimistic about what will happen later down. I think between now and mid next year is going to be a hard call, but hopefully we will see some pickup. I do not agree with anyone that thinks that we can replace tourism in Barbados at any time in the foreseeable future. And that's because our biggest asset is the sun, the sea, the beaches, the people of Barbados. And I don't say that to win any points with anybody. I honestly do believe that Bajans, most Bajans, are among the friendliest people you can meet anywhere in the world. And that's a very big asset for us. They love to talk about Barbados. Most Bajans are very proud about what we have here. And that is a very big plus. Anyway, getting back to the matter at hand, basically, I think we made progress yesterday. We look forward to working with the government and the union in terms of getting through this difficult period together. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Ola, you're good?
Yeah. I would just like to say one point, just like to endorse everything that's been said by my three colleagues here. The one thing I would like to say to the press, and I would really urge you, please, to be, and whilst I know that there's a thing called freedom of the press, and the press are entitled to say what they want to say and print what they want to print, I think sometimes some articles appear that I really wish that, you know, if you're going to carry certain bits of information, I would like you certainly to get the second side of the coin. As far as the industrial relations is concerned, I've been in this business now for 43 years. I was very fortunate. I came up with a father who was the Labour Commissioner in Barbados, who made me understand from very early in my lifetime that the people that work with you are your most important asset. And so for me, we've always done that, and I think that was reflected in our company. And I think that, in truth and in fact, most Barbadian hotels are like that. I read today in the newspaper that we're talking about situation with work permits and so forth. It's interesting because on one of my chats, one of my colleagues whose company employs over 1,000 people said that when she first joined the company, there were some 30 or 40 work permits. She said, today, I don't think we have one, and they have 1,000 people. And so when you hear people saying about Barbadians not being engaged in the industry, it is really, really not true. I don't think I have one work permit in my group, not one in my group, and we had nearly 400 people. I don't think Gordon, you had one, or you?
Yeah, we have 480 employees, and we have one Asian chef work permit.
So you see, these are things that I really want us to start being positive about these things and projecting that, you know, Barbadians, when I first joined this industry 43 years ago, there were real non-nationals in this business. Today, you can hardly find any. And they're all Barbadians. The Barbadians have come through. You can see what has happened with our education. You can see now that people are stepping up to the plate. I remember addressing Harrison College one day, a careers showcase. And when I started saying to the boys in the class what chefs work for, and seeing the fellas, their mouths dropped open. They couldn't believe that chefs earn the sort of money that they earn in this country. People don't talk about these things. So I want us to start sharing the positive. Today, what upset me this morning was when these friends of mine wrote to me and said what to know what was happening in Barbados. They were seeing all this disruption and all this instability with hotels in Barbados and so forth. And I had to go back and say, it's not like that. I said, unfortunately, we have one situation, but we have a couple of other situations, but one in particular. I said, and it's being, you know, I know it's being dealt with, but the point is it sends a very negative image out into the marketplace. So whilst we send the negative, I want us to send some of the positive as well. That's all I want to say at this time.
Thank you. I'd like to ask General Secretary, Ms. Moore. One day we'll be able to afford a proper press room that has mics and things that don't move and all of those things. One day, one day.
Thank you, Prime Minister. I'd like to start by restating the vision or the motto of the Barbados Workers Union. Where there's no vision, the people perish. And it's important for me to start there because the Barbados Workers Union has always, over its near 80 years, has always exemplified a vision for an improved Barbados. And it is that very vision that saw us some 5 months ago deciding not to press through discussions towards easy solutions, but towards solutions that were deemed then and are considered now to be in the interests of the entire country. And I start there because it is important for us to understand, especially now, when we are facing the kind of crisis that we are in, that the easy decisions are not necessarily those that are in the best interests of the people making them or the people on whose behalf the decisions are being made. And when the union was approached and we were in this discussion sometime in June, July, about extending unemployment benefits, we didn't consider that the best thing to do for a country was to extend an unemployment benefit. Where we found that tourism workers were directly impacted, all tourism workers were directly impacted, the question would be, how long can you extend an unemployment benefit to make it meaningful? And in a circumstance where you could not answer that question, 12 weeks? Suppose unemployment benefit was extended 12 weeks. Suppose it was extended for 26 weeks. Are we going to have an answer at the end of 26 weeks? Are we going to have an answer at the end of 40 weeks regarding when tourism will pick back up? Recognizing that there were too many no's, too many unknowns that we were working into, our consideration for the government and for the private sector has been, through this crisis, what can we do to ensure that everybody is as protected as we can do within the limits of the information available to us. And it's for that reason that the Barbados Workers Union proposed a wage subsidy, because we were observing best practice from our international affiliates, and we have been working with them continuously, looking to see what is the best that can be done in situations as difficult as the one that we find ourselves in. And we were very pleased that, notwithstanding the fact that our union was pushing for a 1 year, a 6-month to a 1 year wage subsidy, our discussions morphed into the BEST program that is now making provision for up to 2 years for a wage subsidy, providing protection for workers in an industry that is operating in highly uncertain circumstances. And I say this because it's important for us as a country to be able to filter the noises that we are hearing. And I will not repeat anything that Mr. Odell has said, except to emphasize that it is important at this time when people are going through a lot of mental stress because they do not know what the future is in terms of their jobs and therefore how they're going to provide for their families. It's important that we try to bring as much calm to a situation. There is absolutely no provision in law right now that would deny any worker in Barbados their entitlement to severance payment, contrary to what the principal legislation in our Severance Payment Act provides for. And as we speak about the tourism sector, it's important to start there, because there has been this push by other people, not the Barbados Workers Union, to have severance be brought forward as an answer to the situation that workers find themselves in right now. First of all, let me state that the Barbados Workers Union does not exact any 10% from people when we file a claim and successfully file a claim that sees them being rewarded or awarded with severance. We don't take from people. We don't represent people for our personal pockets, for our benefit. We represent people and we make the decisions on behalf of people that we regard are in their best interests. So it was not, well, it may have been easy for us to push up in June for workers to be getting severance payments. What that would have meant for families is that we would have been advocating for a position that would see a worker take home $10,000 in severance payment. If you received that in June, July, August, where would you be now in a situation where jobs are not assured? Waiting for handouts at welfare, waiting for vouchers, hoping that the Sandy Lane Trust would extend their consideration. So the Barbados Workers Union thought, no, if workers definitely want their severance because they believe that they can utilize their severance to shore up a benefit for them and their families, certainly, let's make that provision. But where the majority of workers, based on our indications, could not do that, let's see how we can cushion them, and hence the job subsidy. And I'm glad that we have the BEST program. And our discussions yesterday were to remind hoteliers and to ask them to advocate amongst their peers in the industry to ensure that more hotels can come on board and sign on to the BEST program. Because not only it protects workers, but what it does is it ensures that this country can continue to function in a way that we are not creating wider divisions between the haves and the have-nots. So I hope that the media is taking careful note, because the media has been part of a movement. And Prime Minister, don't get uncomfortable. I'm not slamming the media, but I'm just saying that we have to be responsible in the way that we present our messaging at a time when I had a meeting with workers yesterday from the Club Barbados, and they were lashing out, as they should. They were lashing out because they are frustrated, they are uncertain, they are confused, they are broke, they are desperate. Mental illness sets in when people function in these conditions. And we have a responsibility to make sure that we bring truth to our people and we bring balance in situations. And the BWU has not been going out there providing updates ball by ball regarding what we have been doing. Because as you negotiate in the public, and as people see what a position is today without seeing how that is going to change tomorrow, subject to negotiations, confusion sets in even more. And we are pleased that for the past 48 hours, that 24 to 48 hours, that discussions have been moving in such a way that we could see all parties coming together in a meeting yesterday. The BHTA supporting the BW's call very forcefully that the workers should not be the ones who are disadvantaged in a particular club situation. And the NIS committing to work to do its utmost to ensure that the unions call for a very speedy resolution to the outstanding severance payments owed to the workers at the club, that those payments can be made. Yes, you've heard that I've asked for Independence Day. I think it would be an important signal of goodwill, but beyond the Club Barbados, the real commitment that has to be made by the social partnership at this time is that we are going to bolster or make suggestions to bolster the current system so that other hotels, other employers who are going through the various challenges now, and as Prime Minister said, those who really need it can get the protection that there is in law, but that those employers who can do better and should be doing better do not use the national insurance scheme and do not use workers to their own benefit. I believe that there's a lot of suggestion out there and enough that will make anyone convinced that in the case of the club, the situation is not genuine. Workers have been reporting to us that they have been given an indication that that establishment would open next year. We have heard reports of job fairs being done at the very property, which would suggest that there is an intention to continue business. So we were heartened that the BHTA, like the BWU, held a very strong view that that is not what they would support, because this is not who we are, this is not what we are about. And I am happy today that the workers who now, all of them that I've spoken to, really want out because of the conditions that they've had to endure for the past 6 months in particular, that they can see their severance with urgent dispatch, and that there is national commitment to moving in not only on the club itself, but other companies that would choose this kind of backyard approach in dealing with serious industrial relations matters that have direct implications on workers and their livelihoods. We have spoken about the club, and there are a number of other issues. You've heard my colleague, Dwayne Paul, in the past week or so having to lament on the situation generally across the tourism industry. And we are looking forward very eagerly to a series of meetings that have been set up for next week, where we will be moving to, in the same way we have had to resolve or try to settle the issue concerning the workers of the club, we will be moving very eagerly during the coming week to address a number of the outstanding issues that are impacting other hotels in the sector. There are numerous issues, but I'm sure given the commitment and the recommitment that we've made yesterday, that we will make similar advances in the same way that we have been able to move to address the situation of Club Barbados. That's all I would wish to say at this point in time.
Thank you. Mr. Haynes, I don't know if you want to address the issue of the NIS and being able to meet the expedited payments, as well as also this notion that we have contracted and taken away rights from workers with respect to severance in this country. Perhaps you, as both chair and an eminent Queen's Counsel, may want to speak.
Prime Minister, members of the press, let me say firstly that the NIS, because of the composition of the board, has the benefit of arguments and submissions from the BWU. The General Secretary is a member of the board. The General Secretary of the NUPW, the Barbados Hotel Tourism Association has a representative on the board. The Barbados Employers Confederation, the Chief Labor Officer, all are members of the board, so that you're really, really listening today to the board members of the National Insurance. Earlier this year, we had the issue of unemployment benefits, and as you're aware, the NIS has The NIS came to the table. Unemployment benefits paid to date are in excess of $135 million. And we have had the benefit. I say all of that to say that at each board meeting, we have the input of employers' representatives, employees' representatives, so the NIS keeps its ear well focused to the foundation, to the floor. We know what is going on. We know what the problems are. Having dealt with the unemployment benefits, the NIS anticipated the issue of severance pay. However, thanks to the ingenuity of the Prime Minister and her government, the BEST program has been put in place. That means that the NIS really is acting as a long stop. If you know the cricket term, we are in the back. Whoever misses the ball, we are there for severance payments. Of course, this issue with the club, as is expected, there are always unforeseen events. Our mandate is to ensure that those employees are paid. I've heard the General Secretary, I've heard the Prime Minister, and instructions have already been given. We have a board meeting tomorrow. Instructions have already been given. On Monday, I beg your pardon, Prime Minister. Our instructions have already been given. Look, do not wait for a paper for all employees. Let us process them every day, because we have, again, we have an expedited process. Since the beginning of the year, we came together. We developed some processes which are expedited. Once all papers are in place, the severance payments would come to the approval of the board, and we are not waiting for one paper for all 65 employees. We plan to ensure that every day the board approves whatever comes to it. We have the commitment of the NIS employees, who are government employees, and they themselves come to the table, and of course they come to the board and say, board, we can't do A or B without compromising the integrity of the system. And we say, certainly, but do your best that you can do, and so that the public can be assured, especially the employees of the former employees of the club, that everything will be done to ensure their severance payments are made come Independence Day. With respect to the issue of those employers who feel that they can pass the obligation for severance onto the NIS, well, that is what the NIS is there for. But at the same time, we have an obligation for those who can afford it to recover from them. And the mandate is to do so without delay. There are some employers who are mischievous enough to pass on that obligation, and the NIS rest assured that the NIS will make immediate and extra efforts to recover those amounts, because it is imperative every dollar that is recovered is a dollar that can be spent, invested by the NIS, and be spent for benefits for Barbadian workers. It is unfair for employers who can afford to do so not to pay severance. And we will make sure that that does not happen as a rule. With respect to the issue of severance payments rights being abrogated and diminished, tell you the truth, I can't follow the argument. What I can tell you is, yes, over the years, there have been some it hasn't operated as if the Severance Payments Tribunal hasn't operated as efficiently as it could. Efforts are being made to review the whole system. And again, I get back to the expedited process. We now have in place an expedited process for the benefit of those employees, and they mainly belong to the hotel sector, but not only the hotel sector, because we are not giving preference to any one sector over the other, but those employees who need their severance pay, we have an expedited process for it, and it's going to work. And it has worked as far as employment was concerned, benefits were concerned. You know, I gauge I gauge the efficiency of the national insurance. It hasn't always been the most efficient, but I gauge the efficiency in this year by what happens on the call-in programs. And you may have noticed that within recent times, the national insurance, so to speak, has gone under the table. That is because we have operated in an efficient manner. And likewise, we have anticipated severance payments, and we are up to the task at the national insurance, and employees will be paid, especially at the club. I don't know if there's anything else that I can add to what I've said.
Thank you.
Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Haynes. Thank you very much to all who have spoken this morning. I want to, before asking about any questions, to make one or two quick points. And I want to speak to both the workers and the owners of companies. Our responsibility as a government is to take care of both of you. And we get it, and we shall do so. And that is why we have implemented a number of programs. I want to go back from the very beginning of this government, when we took a decision that labor, which had carried the adjustment in the 1970s, in the early 1980s when we went to the fund, in the early 1990s when we went to the IMF, in 2013 under the last government, that it was our judgment that labor could not take the majority of the adjustment needed to stabilize the Barbados economy, and in particular our fiscal position, and by extension further on other aspects of our macroeconomic stability. As a result, far fewer people went home than was recommended by the former governor of the central bank, who indicated that this government should have sent home 5,000 workers, if you recall. And we rejected that advice, and we went and limited it to just about 1,000. Taking and making the banks and the non-banking financial institutions and the government's entities through central bank and NIS, they took the burden of the adjustment under this government, not the workers. Secondly, that this government also insisted on giving the workers a 5% pay increase in the public sector at a time when they had had no pay increase negotiated for 10 years and none received for 8 years. Thirdly, that we took a decision to deal with the appointments in the public service and to appoint 3,100 persons who have been acting in positions for 3 years or more. This is not people who come in 2 and 3 months or 4 months. These are people who have been acting for 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. In one instance, I came across one week before last, of 26 years. And that's the kind of madness that we're cleaning up. Then, of course, is the real issue of the other types of industrial disputes that have emerged that we have literally gone in. In the case of customs, you had people who had not been working other than as clerical officers but doing customs work for 20 years in some instances. And this government created 132 clerical officer, 4 posts, customs officer, 4 posts for the first time in the history of this country. Then there were the other types of spats, like what happened when once again workers were unfared by an owner of restaurants, a company owning 3 restaurants, I believe, in this country. The workers went to work the weekend and woke up the Monday morning to find out that they all had no jobs. And very quietly, this government told you we will deal with them. And I'm happy that during the course of this next week, I believe that the matter of their holidays with pay and those other instances will be dealt with, because the chief labor officer took decisions to prosecute the company and to ensure that the workers' rights in this country are defended, and defended stoutly. We have no difficulty with persons coming to Barbados to invest, but I think that the persons on my right and the persons on my left will both agree that in Barbados, what we will not agree to is persons being unfared, whether among owners of capital or persons who are in labor. And this is not the Barbadian way. And for those who come here, we want them to appreciate that we live good with everybody, but we don't take advantage. Bajans don't like people being taken advantage of. Wherever you are, all of us know it, from our families to our communities to the country. And then, of course, we took decisions to support our workers. I defy most of you, or defy all of you rather, to tell me how many other countries in the Caribbean have spent 1.5% almost of GDP in unemployment benefits just to keep workers afloat during the course of this year in the pandemic. And then on top of that now, a BEST program that involves both, one, a job subsidy at 150 million, which is about 1.75% of GDP, and another loan program to facilitate greening and digitization, half of which is reserved for the tourism sector, and the other half for manufacturing, agriculture, and small business, bringing us to a total of just about 3.5%, almost 4% of GDP, 3.75% of GDP. And when you add that with the unemployment benefit, and then we probably will still have to do some recapitalization of the NIS, Mr. Haynes, before this is all over again. And that is why the need to go after those who can pay and who are pursuing sale of property but wanting the government to carry severance. That is why we must go after them, because, and it's very simple, if you have a $25 million in claims for severance, and that's not what we have necessarily, but if you did, and the government paid out the monies on behalf of the employers, technically speaking, the government's liability out of that 25 million is only 6 or 7 million. And it's for the government to recover the other 17, 18. And if we don't recover it, it means that we can't, one, cover as many more people as we may have to cover in other sectors, because we don't know when this is finishing fully. We are hopeful that with the vaccines, that by the middle of next year we can see a resumption of normalcy, even if not a return to 2019. Because a return to 2019 is probably not likely until 2023, 24, according to the estimates of the World Tourism Organization and the World Bank and the IMF and other entities. But we can live. That's the important point. And that return to normalcy is likely probably by the middle of next year. But if we don't go after and reclaim the monies that we have advanced, because the workers must not be made victims because of the wickedness of 1 or 2 employers. The majority are good, but you have a few who want to step on the crease. And in cricket, when you step on the crease, you're what? Out. And it's no different. And if there's not discipline in the management of the affairs of a nation, then anything can happen and anything will happen and anybody will do anything. And that is why I said I'm proud that I speak not on my own behalf alone today or behalf of the government alone, but we speak as a nation with the tripartite arrangement that we have come to embrace and claim as our very own and the foundation of the governance and democracy of this country. And then we went to the Severance Payments Act, and we agreed for the sunset legislation, but Mr. Haynes has thankfully addressed this matter frontally, and this continued notion that the government of Barbados has propped up employers but has decimated the rights of workers and diminished the rights of workers. How many more people must speak? The Chief Labor Officer has spoken. The Chairman of the National Insurance Scheme has spoken. I suspect other persons have also spoken. I'm not even coming to the General Secretary of the Workers' Union or the BHTA or the rest. And I ask the media now to stop trifling with the emotions of the workers by carrying a position that continues to be false. And if you want to investigate, as the General Secretary said, who is it that claims commissions from severance payments of workers when they secure the severance payments?
Every time.
Without paying a certificate to practice law in Barbados, Mr. Haynes, as is required if you as a lawyer were to secure a debt owed for anybody under the Legal Profession Act, the rules, you're entitled to charge a percentage. But if you are not practicing as a lawyer, and trade unions do not traditionally take commissions from people, on what basis are workers being asked to pay a percentage of their severance to an agent for getting it to them when it is as simple as coming to the Severance Payments Tribunal and the NIS? And Mr. Haynes has indicated that while it has not been the most efficient system in the past, I think both Mr. Haynes and the previous chairman, Mr. Goodinedgel, have worked assiduously to make sure that they remove the backlog, not just of severance payments claims, or not just unemployment benefit claims this year, but all of the claims that have been sitting down there in NIS for months and months, and in some instances years, in order to be able to make the system more efficient. I feel as though when we came to office in 2018, our job has now to be designated as cleanup crew. The cleanup crew. Because all we are doing is cleaning up. And as much as we clean up, it's like fixing an old school. When you start to fix it and then you start to take off the roof, you then realize that all the timbers that were holding up the roof bad. And then you start to look at the walls and you go to paint and you realize that the walls got problems too, that you got to stop and deal with that. And that's exactly what we're doing after as long a period of time of a lackadaisical, mediocre, and in some instances downright incompetent approach by the last administration. So I want us to recognize that there are consequences to us allowing people to proffer legal opinions and to proffer opinions to workers as if they are lawyers or as if they are establishment. And in proffering them, they're not even supported on a platform of facts, a platform of truth. And the most clear evidence of that is the misconstruing of the sunset legislation that was passed a few months ago by the Severance Payments Act. And I wouldn't normally speak in these terms, but I am upset that the people who are being affected, it's not me, because I know that the person talking ignorance. It's not anybody here because they know that the person talking ignorance. But it is the workers. And for you then to focus, oh, they can't go to the Employment Rights Tribunal and they can't bring a claim anymore for severance. Absolute bollocks. You have 1 year within which to bring the claim. And there is no piece of legislation that the government of Barbados has passed, the Parliament of Barbados has passed, that has taken that away from any worker in this country. But I go further. On top of that, you then have a situation where they focus you on you can't go to the Employment Rights Tribunal. Well, far from that, we have said that we don't only want you to go to the severance payments tribunal in the traditional way. We want an expedited process. Now, how does an expedited process happen for the club workers? Mr. Haynes will tell you that the letter written by the owners of the hotel or their agent to the Barbados Workers Union, the stories published in your papers, all say that the company accepts that they are closing, the workers must move on, that they were going to pay severance initially 50% in October, 50% in November. They then paid 25%, and Mr. Haynes will tell you part payment of a debt is acknowledgement of the debt. So that's the first thing you learn as a first-year law student. It's true. So that when we get into this nonsense, and we continue to make people, you know, they used to be a saying in Barbados when we were growing up as children that a little bit of knowledge is a dangerous thing. Mm-hmm. A little bit of knowledge is a dangerous thing. Because once you start to make it sound as though you know, and you give people that impression, and people then act on that, as Tony just said, can you imagine if you encourage all of the workers to take, and the average severance for the workers in the industry is $10,000. Between 5 and 10,000, in fact. That's the average. You go and take that severance. It lasts you 3, 4, 5 months. Not even so much if you got children. And where does that leave you? We put the money in the social security system instead of putting it in a BEST program to sustain tourism and to sustain tourism workers. Where does that leave the tourism industry? And it was in August when I went up and down the coast and saw the absolute desolation. That's the word, you know, desolation on the west and south coast. And it came to us that we cannot put this money in a fund and just leave it there and it's done. People draw a severance and the money run out. People draw unemployment benefit and, well, we don't have enough to cover anymore in those large numbers. We need to get people working. That's why we have the COVID relief program. That's why we're facilitating the capital projects. That's why we're doing as much as we can to get as many people working, even if they can't work a full 5 days. People must work and people must live in this country. And that is our commitment to them. But we realize that if we don't commit to the enterprises as well, where the jobs gonna go? Out through the window. So that as much as you want to talk pretty and talk divisively, remember that, look, 1, 2, 3. If any one of the 3 of us fall down, the country lopsided. Any one of the 3. And that is the unique nature of this country, and that is what this government brought back to bear by May 28, 2018, calling its first meeting to involve the owners of capital, the representatives of labor, and the government, because together we believe that we can do this. We may not be able to do it individually, but together we can do it. So I ask those who are here to recognize that you have also a different role to play, because what we don't want is people being sucked in to things. Don't listen to me. Go and get your own lawyer. Don't listen to me. But to go and get your own lawyer means you got to go and spend money. And that's the dangerous thing. And that's why I've tried to have as many other voices. This is the first time I'm addressing this issue, you know, because I didn't want politics associated with it. I wanted people to make an interpretation about the workers' rights without the tint of any political lens whatsoever. And that's why we asked the Chief Labor Officer to speak to it. That's why we've asked now the Chairman of the NIS, who happens to be a Queen's Counsel, to speak to it. And I really would call on some other members of the society to say, let us cease and settle now. Because as you heard from Mr. Odell this morning, all of these things only go to hurt who? The very same workers and the very same owners of businesses in the country, and by extension, the country itself. So I'll pause at this stage. Are there any queries or questions? I know that we've been here for a long time. Yes, Colville? You may have to speak loudly, because remember, use the mic there, because they're streaming and we don't want people to be left out in any way. Just bring the mic wrong so he's not blocking the camera, thanks.
Just two questions from me, Prime Minister.
You might be blocking the ladies.
Sorry,
Thanks.
my apologies.
Just bring the camera, bring the mic around. Thanks. Okay.
Yeah, thanks, bro. With regards to a point of clarity, you would have mentioned that no such agreement in terms of an agreement between the NIS and the hotel was made. I didn't quite get that. Could you just clarify that for me in the sense that...
I don't want to treat you in any way other than as I should. I don't know how to clarify it. There was no such agreement as represented in the papers between NIS and Club Barbados. Yesterday, everyone who is here, with the exception of Mr. Haynes, was in the meeting. Yesterday, we all heard when we gave the floor to the head of the Severance Payments Division of the National Insurance Scheme and to the former head of that division. Yesterday, each and every person at this table, with the exception of Mr. Haynes, heard them say in absolutely clear terms that there was no such agreement given to Club Barbados.
Okay. And my second question, in terms of the BEST program, could you give me an idea of the percentage of hotels that have signed on to the program thus far?
I can't give you an idea of the percentage, but to the best of my knowledge, yesterday we heard that there were about 40 entities that have already applied with over 1,000 jobs. And I think of those, 20-something were hotels. So remember that it's not only hotels who can apply, but allied tourism establishments. But that's what it is at the moment. But in fairness, the program really has only been operational now for a couple of weeks. And it is as a result of that that the BHTA wrote asking to tweak, because there are others who may want to come on, but for example, preference shares can't work for them. There was confusion as to whether the Hilton could benefit, and we've clarified that because it can, and that's 345 employees there alone. There are some people who are leasing properties, and therefore for them that would not work, and we need to find a way to help those operational companies that don't own assets, and how government will treat to them to ensure that there is a balance in terms of what we expect and what they expect at the same time. So it's very much a work in progress. But as I said, one of the reasons why we said that we were not surprised, not floored by the UK decision, is because what we have done here is to create this mechanism that will stand in the place of normal business for as much as 2 years. Do we expect this to go on for 2 years? No. But did we feel the need to do it for a 2-year period to give people confidence? Yes, because so long as they can afford the outer limit, it gives people confidence that should you have lockdowns going on for the next 2 years, the government of Barbados can step in and assist. We do recognize that there may be some instances where we may have to hold an equity position in some of the hotels going forward, but as I explained to the hoteliers yesterday, that we could not do that because that requires an analysis of each company's books, and you could not do that in time to stabilize the employment and to stabilize the hotels. The other last commitment that I want to, and I could have spoken about it, should have spoken about it a little more, is the staycation to which Senator Grant referred. We have discussed with the other one yesterday that we look forward to BHTA meeting with BTMI, I think on Tuesday, or tomorrow, or Monday or Tuesday, to discuss how best the BTMI and the BHTA will work together with the hotel owners and the workers to create opportunities. We know it is Independence, so from as early as next weekend, we know that it is Christmas after that, and even though most people like to stay home for Christmas, there's some who would have normally liked to have traveled. And to that extent, can we not create opportunities and packages for them over the course of the holiday season in an affordable way? Because we are conscious that everything needs to be affordable. That's why the government is also meeting with the formal social partnership on Tuesday to discuss the beginnings of the prices freeze that I spoke about at annual conference a couple of weeks ago, that we need to put in place for the next 18 months. We've already seen wages adjusted both in the private sector, at the level of management and at the level of workers. But concomitant with that adjustment of wages, which happened haphazardly, has to be a position, a policy position in both the public and private sector on prices in order to keep people's nostrils above water.
Morning, Prime Minister. Morning, folks. Prime Minister, how much does the vaccine conversation going on right now factor into the BEST program? Are you looking at that? Are you considering the worst case scenario regardless?
Well, we've planned for the worst case scenario, but we are buoyed by the discussions with respect to the vaccine, especially in the last week. As you would have seen, there are at least 3 to 4 companies that are out there that are reasonably confident that they can hit the market within another month, 6 weeks. The government of Barbados has already paid a deposit for within the COVAX facility, which is where we will get some level of subsidized access. But on Wednesday, as I told you, this was a week for me of resetting and retweaking because it comes just after the half of the financial year. And I met with the Ministry of Health officials, Ministry of Tourism officials for about 4 or 5 hours, and it continues next week. And one of the things that we made clear to everyone is that beyond what we get in the COVAX facility, we are prepared to purchase more in the interest of Barbadians, and in particular, the one that hurts me the most are the school children. You know, yesterday, that little girl that I spoke to, who is absolutely amazing and has a quiet confidence and assurance that should make every Barbadian proud, made the point that she just so misses the ability to be at school. And this is her first year in secondary school, and she's never known what it is to have a normal school attendance. And as if that was not bad enough, I went somewhere yesterday evening, and another young 11-year-old, just equally as confident and as self-assured. And they both floored me. And he was like, look, I'm not getting to go to school. I really, really, really want to go to school. And we had to talk it through and explain. And I know that Minister Bradshaw and the teachers have to determine what we're going to do going forward in January. But this thing has really destabilized the global community. And across the world, the persons who will come to be regarded as some of the worst exposed may not necessarily be the ones that we think now, but in my view, will probably be the young people and children for whom there is going to be a learning deficit or disruption in some instances for persons. So, okay.
Also, any consideration yet for crop over 2021 or?
Too early. The consideration here, look, I'm crossing my fingers all around. Not only because of the fact that the country's economy needs it, and I should say to you, and the hoteliers would probably be pleased, that we have and are hoping, with fingers crossed, too, that UNCTAD 15, the United Nations Congress for Trade and Development Conference, we've set it for the end of April. I think it's April 25th to 30th, but I can't remember. But I know that the hoteliers are hopeful that that can happen because that gives them a good bounce and boost at a time that would traditionally be the beginning of the summer season, which is their low point. So we hope that that, as well as the fact that our carnival, our crop over comes much later in the year, that we still have a chance to make that happen and to bring people here. And people want to do a lot now in the holiday season, but as I said a few nights ago in an Instagram post, take time. Crop over and the fetting and the turkey and the ham, everything will be there next year. But for now, let's just get out of this difficult zone. And we're lucky because while others are truly experiencing the worst aspects of the second wave, we're experiencing it economically, but not well. We are still not yet in that place where Barbadians have been exposed to community spread. And I don't ever think about it because I know that we are one day away from it always. And that's why you hear me ask people, please, just be vigilant. Please, just don't do the things. I went to FET for the year. I went to FET since January. That's a fact. And if you know me, you know that I'm a FET person. You understand? I haven't been since January because I'm conscious that I also have to interact with different levels of people. I can't be the one putting people at risk, however which way you cut it, slice it, or dice it. So I've had to learn to live differently in the last few months and to learn once again to enjoy my music and to talk ignorance and to, they got enough technology that can keep you in contact with all kinds of people. Okay? Any other questions or comments? Ian?
Yeah, good afternoon, Madam PM, and good afternoon, Head Table. Of course, congratulations to the new St. George North representative. You had mentioned the 3 hotels at the beginning of the year. As everybody is well aware, I'm a strong social media advocate and activist, and I don't know if any of you are aware of the fact, with regards to those same 3 hotels, a chap who has a significant interest in that manor made a donation to the Shropshire Derby. It's supposed to have been
You're talking about the 3 restaurants.
Yes, correct. And this was said in a social media forum concerning the activities of the garrison, whether it's horse racing, whether it's photography. The gentleman is supposed to have made some contribution. I'm not sure if it's $1 million US, $1 million Barbados, or whatever, but he, you know, and yet at the same time, hear the people here. So, no, this is just, I'm not asking for anything, I'm just making sure you're all aware of that fact.
Okay. I wasn't, actually.
The other factor that I am asking about, but this is in relation to the same vaccine and everything, is Barbados looking to develop proper cold storage facilities? Because I understand it might need dry ice as opposed to regular refrigeration that we use.
Different vaccines require different things, and yes, one does require significant cold storage. As a matter of interest, only this morning, one of the officers from the Ministry of Health, and I'm pulling it up now, would have, and see, the last thing he sent me back since the press conference, the type of vaccine will determine if the cooler or freezer is needed. And we actually have an offer that has been made to the government, a donor, and that was the message I got this morning, prepared to donate vaccine cooler freezer for COVID-19 vaccines. We also have the charitable trust, which we have. Barbados has been very lucky this year, and a number of persons have donated. As you know, there was a COVID-19 charitable trust to which a lot of funds were contributed by expatriates who have properties on island. And I think that the fund there, they've spent a couple $1 million already, but there's just under $2 million US, I believe, still in that fund, which is likely to go to help supplement whatever we want with respect to, I suspect, the vaccines. So we are on target, but we want to go a little wider than what the COVAX facility will normally provide for us, because we believe that, and the doctors will tell us what level of penetration in the population. I think that that will give us the herd immunity, but I think it is somewhere probably between 60 and 70%. But those are some of the things that we actually are going to be discussing next Wednesday as we continue the review meeting that we had with the COVID persons. Okay? I should say and use this opportunity to tell you that the government of Barbados will also be making announcements during the course of this week about how best we are going to properly commend the workers and all the frontline workers with a special medal that will be announced during the course of the week. Okay?
Good afternoon, Prime Minister and the panel.
Before we go on, Mr. Seal wanted to make a point, sorry.
Yeah, I just wanted to make the point. I'm not sure if it's something that most people realize, but we talk about the BEST program as a subsidy, and I've had a lot of comments when I'm out talking to the public people say, well, you know, the hotels get everything. They're just given this and they're given that. I think you need to be very clear that this is an investment or whatever that the government is making, but it has to be repaid. So the hotels, and I think that's very important, actually for the government as well, because I think that people have the wrong impression that this is money being given to the hotels. It is money that has to be repaid, and it is being used, as the Prime Minister said, 80% for labor minimum and 20% minimum for supervisory staff and management staff. And it has requirements in terms of the employment of people, the number of people. It also has, for example, that companies cannot pay any dividends for the entire time that money has not been repaid. And if it goes into a certain period of length of time after 2 years, there is interest that is carried on those monies that have been put in. So I think, in fairness to us, the hoteliers, in fairness to the government, and in fairness to so the public understands the position, this is not a grant. It's not free money.
I thank Mr. Seal for reinforcing that point and to reminding the public that yes, the hoteliers will pay back. What we've tried to do is to be more flexible in working with them as to how and when they pay back, that a bank, I suppose, traditionally will be, but it is to be paid back. And he is correct that the public interest is being protected, that as long as that money is out there, that they will not make extraordinary increases in management fees or in payment of dividends, so that there is fairness and equity all around. Okay? Yes, ma'am.
Good afternoon. My question is from Mr. Haynes. With the fund having had to pay out $135 million towards unemployment benefits, I know some people are concerned about the current financial standing. Could you give us an idea of that, please? About the current financial standing of the fund.
Pardon? I don't think that we have to worry about the current financial standing of the national insurance. Yes, you've heard the Prime Minister earlier say that we have the government's assurance that the unemployment fund would be recapitalized. But when one looks at the assets of the national insurance, with the national insurance, I am always proud to say, and I don't know if the Prime Minister would agree with me, but we are the richest institution in Barbados. We control at this moment assets in excess of $4 billion. We $4 billion, Prime Minister. We know that I beg your pardon, there was in the restructuring, we took a hit of approximately $1.2 billion, but there are sufficient funds there that we can see this through for at least for the next 2 years, so that there is no cause for concern.
And I think you heard me say earlier that the government will do what it has to do periodically to recapitalize. Okay? Any other questions, or can we, this is it? Okay, I want to thank the members of the media. BHTA, is there anything else you'd like to add as we close? Yeah, thank you. BWU, anything? And Mr. Haynes, you're good, you just had the last word. I'd like to thank the members of the media for affording us this opportunity. This is as much an informational press conference as it is one to talk through the issues. And I think we're going to have a lot more talking through of issues in these difficult times for persons, because it can't, in some instances, be captured in a 60-second soundbite or in 3 inches of column space. And to that extent, I thank you, and I'd also look forward to working with the media to see what are the other areas of opaqueness that you would wish to have clarification on. And either at my level or at the level of other members of the cabinet or chairmen and CEOs of state-owned enterprises, will seek to continue to keep you updated on as many things as possible. Thank you. Have a wonderful weekend. But be safe and don't do foolishness, because we don't want things to topple over. Thank you.